Have you ever been in an argument, a really heated one, where the other person seemed completely unreasonable? Maybe it was about politics, maybe religion, maybe just a decision at work. And no matter how clearly you explained your side, no matter how logical you were, they just didn't get it? Now here's the uncomfortable question. What if they were thinking the exact same thing about you? What if both of you were intelligent, well-meaning, even moral people, and yet you were standing on completely opposite sides of an invisible wall, unable to reach each other? This isn't a random thought. This is one of the deepest puzzles in all of human psychology. And today, we're going to crack it open. Welcome. Today we're exploring a book that genuinely changed the way millions of people see politics, religion, and human nature itself. The book is called The Righteous Mind: Why Good People Are Divided by Politics and Religion, written by social psychologist Jonathan Haidt. By the end of this video, you won't just understand why people disagree. You'll understand why you disagree the way you do. And that self-awareness alone might be the most valuable thing you gain today. Let's start with the man behind these ideas. Jonathan Haidt is a professor of ethical leadership at New York University's Stern School of Business. But before that, he spent decades as a moral psychologist, someone who studies how humans think about right and wrong. What makes Haidt unusual is that he didn't just sit in a lab running experiments on college students. He traveled. He studied moral reasoning across cultures, in the United States, Brazil, India. He wanted to understand whether morality was something humans invented or something deeper, something almost biological. What he discovered shook the foundations of how psychologists and most educated people think about the human mind. It turns out we've been wrong about how moral reasoning works. Not a little wrong. Fundamentally, deeply wrong. Here's where the journey begins. Imagine you're sitting at a dinner table with someone who holds completely opposite political views from you. You bring up a topic, let's say immigration, and within seconds, you both feel something. Not a thought, a feeling, a gut reaction. And then, this is the fascinating part, both of you spend the next 10 minutes building arguments to justify that gut feeling you already had. This is the central insight of Jonathan Haidt's entire book. He puts it simply, moral reasoning doesn't lead to our moral conclusions. It follows them. To explain this, Haidt uses one of the most powerful analogies in modern psychology. Picture an elephant. And sitting on top of that elephant is a small rider, a person holding reins, looking like they're in control. The elephant is your intuition, your gut feeling, your automatic, emotional response to the world. The rider is your conscious reasoning, the logical, verbal part of your mind that believes it's making decisions. Here's the thing about this elephant, it is enormous. It is powerful, and it has its own agenda. The rider thinks they're guiding the elephant, but most of the time, the elephant goes wherever it wants, and the rider just comes up with a story for why that was the right direction all along. Think about the last time you made a major decision, a relationship, a job, a move to a new city. Did you make a spreadsheet, list all the pros and cons, and follow the logic wherever it led? Or did you feel something first, and then gather reasons to justify what you already wanted to do? If you're honest, it was probably the second one. And that's not a flaw. That's how human brains are wired. Haidt draws on decades of research, including the brilliant work of psychologist Antonio Damasio, to show that people who lose the ability to feel emotions due to brain damage don't become better decision makers. They become paralyzed. They can't decide what to eat for lunch. Because without feelings, without that elephant, the rider has no direction. Emotions aren't a distraction from good thinking. They are the foundation of it. The problem isn't that we have an elephant. The problem is that we don't realize the elephant is driving. But here's where it gets even more interesting. The moral reasoning isn't really about finding truth. What is it actually for? Haidt's answer is provocative. Moral reasoning is mostly for convincing others, and for defending ourselves in the court of social opinion. Think about lawyers. A defense attorney isn't trying to discover whether their client is innocent. They're trying to build the most persuasive case for innocence. A prosecutor isn't running an open-minded inquiry, they're making the case for guilt. Both are excellent reasoners, but neither one is reasoning toward truth. They're reasoning toward a conclusion they've already committed to. Haidt says our moral minds work the same way. We are all, every single one of us, intuitive lawyers. We feel something is right or wrong, and then we construct the argument. He tested this with a fascinating experiment. He told people stories, hypothetical scenarios designed to trigger moral disgust without any obvious victim. For example, imagine a brother and sister who are adults, on a trip together, decide one night to be intimate. They use protection, nothing bad happens, and they both agree it was a one-time thing. They actually feel closer afterward. Now, is that wrong? Almost everyone immediately said, yes, that's wrong. Then Haidt asked, why? And people started listing reasons. What if the protection failed? He pointed out it didn't. What if it psychologically harmed them? He pointed out they both felt fine. One by one, every logical objection was neutralized. And then something fascinating happened. People ran out of arguments, but they didn't change their answer. They said things like, I don't know, I can't explain it, I just know it's wrong. Haidt called this moral dumbfounding. The reasoning ran dry, but the moral conviction didn't budge. Because the conviction came from the elephant, not the writer. And the elephant doesn't need a reason. Now we get to the heart of the book. The question that Haidt spent years trying to answer. If moral intuition is the foundation of our moral lives, where do those intuitions come from? Are they random? Cultural? Universal? The answer he arrived at is what he calls moral foundations theory. And it might be the most important framework for understanding political and cultural conflict in the modern world. Here's the idea. Think of the human moral mind like a tongue. Your tongue can detect several distinct flavors: sweet, salty, sour, bitter, umami. You don't choose which flavors to taste. Your tongue is built to taste all of them. But people's taste preferences vary. Some people love bitter foods. Some can't stand sour. Some have very sensitive palates, some don't. Haidt argues that human morality works the same way. We have a set of built-in moral taste receptors, and different cultures and individuals develop different sensitivities to each one. He identifies 6 moral foundations. Let's walk through them together, because this will change how you see every political argument you've ever had. The first is care and harm. This is the most universal moral foundation. We evolved to care deeply about the suffering of others, especially children and the vulnerable. When you see a child crying or an animal in pain, something inside you responds. That's this foundation activating. The opposite pole is harm, cruelty, neglect, suffering. The second is fairness and cheating. Humans are deeply attuned to justice, to proportionality, to people getting what they deserve. We track favors. We remember who kept their word and who didn't. We feel real anger at free riders, people who take without contributing. This foundation fires when you feel that rules are being applied unfairly. The third is loyalty and betrayal. We are a tribal species. For most of human history, surviving meant belonging to a group, and groups that held together survived longer than groups that fell apart. So we evolved a powerful moral sense around team loyalty. Betraying your group is one of the deepest moral violations in most human cultures. Think about how it feels to root for a sports team, or to hear that a soldier defected. The fourth is authority and subversion. We evolved in hierarchical groups, and most of those hierarchies, when functioning well, created order and reduced conflict. We have a natural moral sense that respects legitimate authority and sees subversion as threatening. This doesn't mean blind obedience, but it means that the feeling of, you can't just do whatever you want, there are rules and roles, is not mere conformity. It's a moral intuition. The fifth is sanctity and degradation. This is perhaps the most mysterious foundation. Humans feel that certain things, certain objects, certain bodies, certain spaces are sacred, and that contaminating or degrading them is deeply, viscerally wrong. This is why desecrating a flag feels like a moral outrage to some people. Why certain sexual behaviors feel disgusting even between consenting adults. Why people won't eat food that has been touched by something they find revolting, even if it's perfectly clean. And the sixth, which Haidt added later, is liberty and oppression. This is the moral concern about domination, about people or institutions pushing others around, about tyranny, the desire for freedom from coercion. Interestingly, this foundation shows up in both progressive and libertarian moral thinking, but for different reasons and against different targets. Now here's where it gets politically electric. Haidt and his team surveyed tens of thousands of people across the political spectrum and found something striking. People who identify as politically liberal, left-leaning, primarily use two of these foundations: care and fairness. Their moral world revolves around preventing harm and ensuring equal treatment. People who identify as conservative draw on all six foundations. They care about care and fairness too, but they also value loyalty, authority, and sanctity as genuine moral concerns, not just cultural baggage. This is not an argument that conservatives are right and liberals are wrong, or vice versa. It's something more profound. These groups are literally speaking different moral languages. Imagine you grew up in a family where only sweet and salty were considered real flavors. Then you meet someone who also loves bitter and umami. You're not going to understand their food preferences. You might not even believe those are real flavors. You'll think they're just confused, or deceived, or eating badly. That's what happens in political arguments. Liberals and conservatives aren't just disagreeing about facts or policies. They're operating on different moral palettes, and neither side realizes it. So far, we've learned that our moral intuitions drive our reasoning, and that different people have different moral foundations. But Haidt goes one level deeper, into something that explains one of the most powerful and dangerous forces in human history: groupishness. Here's the question: why do humans sometimes transcend their individual selfishness and sacrifice for the group? Why do soldiers throw themselves on grenades? Why do people work 80-hour weeks for a startup they believe in? Why do fans weep when their team loses over a game they didn't even play? Haidt's answer is that humans are, as he puts it, 90% chimp and 10% bee. Most of the time, we are self-interested social primates. We compete for status, resources, mates. But under certain conditions, something switches on. A deeper layer of identity activates. We stop feeling like individuals and start feeling like part of something larger. The team, a tribe, a nation, a movement. He calls this the hive switch. And when it flips, the individual temporarily dissolves into the group. The experience can feel transcendent, almost spiritual. You felt it probably at a concert, when the music swells and the whole crowd moves together. At a religious ceremony. At a protest where everyone around you believes the same thing. On a sports field, or watching your team in the championship game. In those moments, you feel something beyond yourself. You feel merged, connected, part of one organism. Now, this is deeply beautiful. It's the foundation of human cooperation, of religion, of art, of civilization itself. But it also has a dark side. The hive switch doesn't just create love for the in-group. It creates suspicion of the out-group. And history shows us what happens when groups with strong hive identities face off against each other. It was genocides, crusades, political tribalism so fierce that people can't see the humanity in those on the other side. Haidt argues that the rise of social media and partisan media has been systematically activating the hive switch on both sides of the political spectrum. We are being sorted into teams. And once you're in a team, the elephant doesn't care about the truth. It cares about winning. Here's a question that might be bothering you. If all of this is true, if we're driven by intuitions, if our reasoning is post hoc, if we're tribal, what do we do about it? Can't we just reason our way to better conclusions? The uncomfortable truth Haidt offers is, not easily, and not alone. There's a concept in psychology called the my-side bias, the tendency to search for, favor, and recall information that confirms what you already believe. Study after study shows that smart people are actually better at my-side bias. They're more skilled at building elaborate justifications for whatever their elephant already wants. Intelligence doesn't make you more objective. It makes you a better lawyer for your pre-existing views. Think about that for a second. The smarter you are, the more dangerous your confirmation bias can be, because you're better at defending it. This is why Haidt argues that individual reasoning is almost never the path to moral progress. History shows that moral change usually happens through social movements, through people encountering those who are different from them in ways that bypass the argument and hit the emotion. People didn't change their minds about slavery primarily because of philosophical arguments. They changed when they met enslaved people, when they heard their stories, when the elephant moved first and then the rider caught up. This doesn't mean reasoning is useless. It means reasoning works better as part of a social process, when we are genuinely exposed to people we respect, who hold different views, in conditions that aren't adversarial. When someone challenges your moral intuition in a calm, curious, non-threatening way, and you genuinely like and respect them, the elephant may shift slightly. And when the elephant shifts, the rider follows with new reasons. One of the most surprising and beautiful sections of this book is where Haidt takes on religion. In our secular, educated culture, many people see religion as irrational, as superstition dressed up in ritual. But Haidt offers a radically different view. He argues that religion is not primarily a set of factual claims about the universe. It's a social technology, a tool that human groups developed over thousands of years of cultural evolution to bind people together, to activate the hive switch, to coordinate cooperation at massive scales. Think about what rituals do. When a community gathers to pray together, or sing together, or perform the same physical movements at the same time, something happens that can't be explained purely by the semantic content of the prayers. Bodies synchronize. Emotions align. The sense of shared identity deepens. Research shows that even simple synchronized behaviors, like walking in step with a stranger, increase trust and cooperation. Soldiers have known this for centuries. That's why armies march. Haidt doesn't ask you to believe in God. He asks you to consider that religion, whatever its origins, has served a function in human society that pure reason and individualism cannot easily replicate. It creates the social glue that holds communities together. And here is his challenge to secular liberals in particular. If you want to create a better, more cooperative society, you can't just dismantle the sacred without replacing it. Every society needs something to feel sacred, something beyond negotiation, beyond cost-benefit analysis. The question isn't whether to have sacred values. It's which ones to choose. Let's talk about what this all means for how you live your life, especially if you're someone who cares about the state of the world and finds yourself constantly frustrated by people who just don't get it. Haidt tells a story about his own transformation. He grew up liberal. He believed, as many educated people do, that conservatism was essentially a failure of reasoning, that if conservatives just understood the evidence, they'd reach liberal conclusions. He thought the moral world was basically simple: prevent harm, ensure fairness, and you're done. Then he went to India. He lived with families in different parts of the country. He watched the way moral life actually worked. The rituals, the hierarchies, the sense of sanctity and pollution, the deep obligations of loyalty. And something shifted in him. He didn't agree with everything he saw, but he understood it. He realized that the moral world he grew up in, centered on individual rights and harm prevention, was not the only coherent moral world. It was one variation on a theme that runs through all of human culture. When he returned and started studying American politics through this new lens, he found that conservative moral concerns about loyalty, authority, sanctity weren't just rationalizations for selfishness or prejudice. They were responses to real problems that any society faces. How do you hold a community together across generations? How do you maintain institutions that took centuries to build? How do you protect the things that matter most from being slowly eroded? These are not stupid questions, and they don't have easy answers. Now, the same insight works in reverse. When conservatives hear liberal moral concerns about systemic injustice, about the harm done to vulnerable groups, about expanding the circle of who deserves care, these aren't just naive idealism. They're responses to real failures of institutions and traditions that have sometimes been used to protect privilege and crush the vulnerable. Both sides are responding to real moral challenges. Both are using genuine moral foundations. The tragedy is that neither can fully see or respect what the other is doing. At one point in the book, Haidt invokes the movie The Matrix. You remember the scene? Neo is offered 2 pills. The red pill shows him the truth. The blue pill keeps him comfortable and asleep. Haidt's moral psychology is a kind of red pill. Once you understand that your moral convictions are largely driven by intuitions shaped by evolution, culture, and the social groups you belong to, once you see the matrix, you can't unsee it. You start to notice the elephant in your own reasoning. You catch yourself constructing arguments for conclusions you've already reached. You see the hive switch flipping on when you're in a group that agrees with you. You notice the righteous anger that feels so virtuous, and you ask, is this anger tracking truth, or is it the elephant on the move? This is deeply uncomfortable, because the righteous mind loves being right. It loves the clarity of being on the good team, fighting the evil team. Moral certainty feels amazing. Moral humility feels exposed and uncertain. But here is Haidt's profound argument. The path forward, for individuals, for communities, for democracy itself, runs through moral humility, not moral certainty. It runs through genuine curiosity about why someone who seems wrong might actually be tracking something real. It runs through the willingness to let your elephant be moved, not manipulated, but genuinely moved, by contact with people who are different from you. So what do you actually do with all of this? Let me offer you the deepest practical takeaways from everything we've covered today. First, notice the elephant before you speak. The next time you feel a strong moral reaction to something, outrage, disgust, contempt, pause. Not to suppress the feeling, but to notice it. To ask, where is this coming from? Is this a foundation I value consciously? Or is this my tribal identity reacting to a threat? There's a world of difference between the two. Second, look for the foundation, not just the argument. When someone holds a moral view you find baffling, ask yourself, which of the 6 foundations might be driving this? If a conservative is upset about a policy that violates tradition, they might be responding to the loyalty or sanctity foundation. If a liberal is outraged about inequality, they're probably drawing on care and fairness. Understanding the foundation doesn't mean agreeing, but it makes the person legible. And legibility is the first step toward dialogue. Third, change your elephant before changing your arguments. If you want to change someone's mind on a moral issue, don't start with facts and logic. Start with relationship, with shared experience, with genuine curiosity about their life. The rider follows the elephant. If you want to reach the rider, you first have to reach the elephant, and elephants respond to emotions, stories, and the sense that you respect and care about them as a person. Fourth, expand your moral palette deliberately. If you're politically liberal, spend real time, not debate time, with people who are genuinely, thoughtfully conservative. Read the best conservative thinkers, not the worst. If you're conservative, do the same in reverse. Not to be converted, but to understand what flavors of moral reality you might be missing. Fifth, hold your righteous certainty lightly. The feeling of moral certainty is one of the most seductive feelings humans experience. It feels like truth, but Haidt's entire body of work shows that moral certainty is often a sign that the elephant is in charge, not the truth. The people in history who did the most damage were usually absolutely certain they were right. Let's come back to where we started. That dinner table argument. Those 2 intelligent people, standing on opposite sides of an invisible wall. Now you know something you didn't know before. That wall isn't made of stupidity, or selfishness, or moral failure. It's made of different moral foundations, different sensitivities to care, fairness, loyalty, authority, sanctity, and liberty. It's made of the same evolutionary heritage that made humans capable of the most extraordinary cooperation in the animal kingdom, and the same groupishness that has made us capable of the most extraordinary violence. The Righteous Mind is not a book about politics. It's a book about what it means to be human. It's about the gap between how we think and how we actually think. It's about the elephant that runs through all of us, powerful, emotional, ancient, and the rider who tells the story of where we're going. But here's what I find most moving about Haidt's vision. He doesn't end in despair. He ends in something rare in academic psychology, genuine hope. Not the naive hope that if everyone just reasoned better, everything would be fine, but the deeper hope that comes from understanding. When you truly understand that the person across from you is not evil, that they're running on a moral operating system built by evolution, shaped by culture, responding to real problems that matter, something changes. Not everything, maybe not even very much on the surface, but something changes in how you hold your own certainty. Something changes in how you listen. And if enough of us let something change, If enough of us take the red pill and start seeing the matrix of our own righteousness, then maybe we can stop the endless cycle of moral condemnation and start building something that actually works. Not because we all agree, but because we finally understand each other well enough to disagree in ways that don't destroy us. That, I believe, is the deepest lesson of the righteous mind. We are not purely rational. We are not purely selfish. We are something stranger and more beautiful than either. Moral creatures, built to care deeply, to belong fiercely, and to be absolutely convinced that we are right. The question is whether we're willing to be curious about what we might be wrong about. Thank you for watching. If this video made you think differently about someone you've been arguing with, or about yourself, please share it. Leave a comment with the moral foundation you think drives you most. And if you haven't read The Righteous Mind, I can't recommend it highly enough. It might be the most important book you read this year. See you in the next one.